Hello, everyone. I am Amy Perkins, a senior business consultant with Ben & Jerry's and a member of the Women's Franchise Committee. I want to thank you for checking out our podcast series called Her Success, the stories of female franchise leaders. Now I'm giggling because, as you can see, I'm not sitting with a woman today. I am sitting with the great Greg Nathan. But typically, we highlight women who are changing the future of the franchise sector. They share insights on everything from being an effective leader to all of the mentors who have inspired them. They often share stories of workplace challenges we can all relate to, and each woman talks about their place in franchising and how it changed their lives. However, today, I get the pleasure of highlighting Greg Nathan, someone who typically needs no introduction, but I shall give him one anyway. To start, Greg was the 2018 IFA Crystal Compass Award winner. The Crystal Compass is given by the Women's Franchise Committee to an individual who exemplifies leadership. It was established to recognize women and men who have made significant contributions through leadership within their franchise organization, the franchise community, or the community in which they live. So it's no surprise that Greg fit the bill. Greg has been a business psychologist for 37 years and is the founder of the highly respected Franchise Relationship Institute. His unique insights into how franchisees and franchisors can maximize their success comes from his extensive research and practical work with over 500 franchise brands and over 40,000 franchisees. He is the author of several books, all of which I have read, of course. Greg's enthusiasm for franchising comes from his deep respect for small business owners and his experience as a successful multi-unit franchisee and a senior franchisor executive for one of Australia's iconic franchise brands. Greg was also inducted into the Australian Franchise Hall of Fame, which is amazing because I don't think I've ever been able to say that I've sat down with a Hall of Famer. But I suppose it makes sense since you're basically a celebrity in the franchising world. I have been a fan of Greg since I was first introduced to him exactly, and this is no joke, 10 years ago to the day at his Profitable Partnerships boot camp. So it's very, very fitting that we are sitting down today for this conversation. So Greg, welcome to our podcast.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
10 years.
10 years is a long time to know someone.
Yeah, it's a little embarrassing as you read out all that because it's a lot of puffery. I just try and do my best work every day in everything I do. Yeah.
Hey, that's why we like you, Greg. I promise. There's not a lot of puffery to you. Well, why don't we get started by hearing a bit about your story from you? So tell us how you got started in franchising and how that took you to where you are today.
I was at university, as many students, working part-time, and I was working very hard, actually. I had a full-time job in a bakery. And so I was starting at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then, I'd finish, go home, have a shower, and then head off to lectures. And I mastered the art of sort of sitting in a lecture like this while I was asleep, kind of nodding in my sleep to give some sort of semblance of sort of consciousness. And interestingly, that company had a small group of stores, company-owned stores. These were community bakeries, and they started to franchise. And so I had worked in the company-owned stores working for store managers, and then I started to work for franchisees. And I really noticed the difference between the franchisee business owner who was passionate, took a real interest in you, was under a lot of stress often. You could really see it in their manner and so on. And I was fascinated by this. And I really enjoyed working with the franchisees rather than the store managers. And as it turned out, one of the franchisees offered me a partnership that during university break, I would often look after their businesses for them. They'd go on a vacation, and I did a reasonably good job, apparently, motivating the staff and looking after the customers and baking the bread. So he was bold enough to say, would you like to come in with me? And this is a trend we see with really switched on multi-unit owners. They're always looking for high potential young people to bring in, and it's almost like the next generation for succession. And he was smart enough, and he's still a mentor. And to this day, I still, see him from time to time. So that's how I got into franchising. And I was working actually at Monash University in Melbourne, doing research on the brain of stroke patients at the time, and not enjoying it a lot, because I felt it was really more about my supervisor getting a paper published. And that sort of whole field of academia wasn't really exciting me. Whereas the world of business and making a difference in your local communities, doing real things, kind of got the juices going a bit. So that's how I got into it originally.
I love that. Do you have can you reference one point in particular where you decided, like, look, I'm not really interested in thinking about this whole brain in that way any longer, and sort of changed you into really wanting to go in this direction?
Yeah, there was actually, now you say it, I was in a hospital and I was doing some experiments with an old man. He's probably my age actually now, but when I was young, I saw this old dude, and I was asking him to push buttons on a machine. We were testing his reaction time. He'd had a stroke, all right, and we were trying to work out how to help stroke patients. So the intention was good, but I thought, this guy shouldn't be doing experiments. He should be getting cared for by the nurses and focusing on other things. And it occurred to me he was about the age of my grandfather. Mm-hmm. And I thought, if I went to visit my grandfather and some psychologist was sitting with him, getting him to do this test, I'd be pretty angry. So I felt a little bit ashamed at that moment. And I thought, are we exploiting these people to publish papers and things? And that's when the seed of doubt. And it was actually about 3 days later that I got the phone call from John, who was the multi-unit franchisee. And I thought, this is kind of Providence playing itself out. I need to make a shift.
I love that. I love that. Well, I think the one thing that we know about you, Greg, is that you are positive, right? You have this positive personality. Yeah, of course. That's infectious. And I love that you could turn that moment that was so real and so sort of like, kind of heartbreaking and odd in the moment, right, into something sort of forward thinking. But there had to have been other challenges that you faced. So if you have any challenges that you know of that you want to share, but also your thoughts on how positive attitude can affect sort of everything.
Yeah. Look, the curse of people who have big ideas or a vision, which I've always had, I guess it is a gift. Like, I can see things very tangibly in the future about what I want to achieve. I can almost taste it and touch it. Wow. And that sort of is what drives me to a large extent. But the gap that often exists between where you want to be and where you are, you could call it the frustration zone. And mm-hmm. I've had to live with that, and I still live with it this day. And that sometimes makes me a little bit cranky. So as my staff would attest, all right? So when I'm with you and my clients, I am on my best behavior, and I do, I want to be positive, and I am naturally positive. But when I'm with my heads down and we're trying to make things happen and invent new stuff, sometimes it's really hard. And if anyone who's on the call who understand, anyone who's an entrepreneur, who's developed new ways of doing things, that you seldom get it right the first time, the second time, the third time, or the fourth time. Sometimes you have to go up 10 blind alleys and throw away everything you've done before you go, this is it, we've nailed it. And so that can be difficult. So it's that perseverance to keep going, I find is often a challenge. And I guess the challenge is also not to take it out on those who love you the most and who are trying to help you.
Absolutely. So what do you do when you're cranky?
I try and be self-aware. Mm-hmm. And this is something we teach our participants in our programs as well. So the fancy name these days is mindfulness. This has always been something, that good humans have done. They become self-aware how they're impacting on other people and face into it, admit it. So I find if you just say, I'm a bit cranky this morning. You can say it to yourself, but you might even say it out loud to those you're with and make a bit of a joke about it. That will often lighten the mood and ground you and get your brain working a lot better. In psychology, we call it name it to tame it. Name it to tame it. So when you name a negative emotion, it actually activates the frontal part of the brain where your clear thinking and your language centers are and so on. And it settles down some of those negative emotions.
I think that's great. I love it. I think we all hope that we have people in our lives that are willing to be honest about the fact that maybe that day they're being a little cranky, or that you yourself feel comfortable enough saying to someone, man, I'm cranky today.
And I'm sorry, and I don't want to be this way, so I'll work on it, but just letting you know.
Totally. I think that's a really good sort of transition into leadership, right? And so that's probably one of the things that you think makes for a great leader. What else would you say makes for a great leader, and what are some of the characteristics that you've seen in leaders or mentors that you've worked with that you just sort of so appreciate those skills?
Yeah, I think in franchising in particular, leadership is, there's a certain type of leadership that I always look for. And when I see it, you just know that person's got it. And it's a combination of a few things. So I find that great leaders have suffered often in their earlier life. They've been through hardship and they've worked through it. And what that builds is empathy in you. You do find that people who suffer have more empathy for other people who have suffered. And I do believe, it sounds a little bit esoteric, but the role of suffering in life is to develop in you the capacity to show empathy. Sure. And I do remind myself of that sometimes if you're going through a hard time, to say, this is actually going to be good for me in the long term. I'm going to be a lot more sensitive about other people who might be going through a similar experience. So that would be one. I find that great franchisor leaders often have run small businesses and they understand or they've come from a small business family. There's also a certain amount of humility. And this is a little bit of a paradox, because I think traditionally, for various reasons, there's been a bit of this myth that, leaders are all about, being bold and outspoken. And we all know there's been some recent examples of that. And but I do think that the best leaders that I've worked with who really get sustainable results are those that have this humility, that they're not there for themselves. They're there for the organizational goals. They're there for the people around them, and they pay attention to the people around them to bring people with them. They really listen well. And we were talking earlier about fessing up. When mistakes are made in the organization, they don't have any problem at all to say, you know what, we could have done better there. And so what we're going to do, we're going to fix it. And we're also, this is what we've learnt. And they also ask those around them what they need to help them fix the situation. And I find that attitude, people love it.
Yes.
Franchisees in particular. Whereas you see some leaders try and cover up and they try and pretend everything is great when it's not, because they may want to look good to the people they're reporting to. Sure. And it really creates a toxic culture and poor performance. So there's a few thoughts.
No, I think that's great. There's going to be a lot of women listening to this podcast, of course. So, and I know that women are always trying to hone in on skills on how to be better leaders, especially in a world that can feel a little disorienting at times for women in positions of power. So I'm curious from you, Greg, who has been the most influential woman in your life? Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Probably my wife. Who's the epitome of humility. And, they say opposites attract. And so in my case, this is definitely what's happened. So Anne, and she would be embarrassed, if she knew I was saying this. In terms of values, I think if you're looking for a partner in life, this is sort of Uncle Greg's advice, all right, to everyone. I think there's two things you really need to pay attention to. One is values. Do you think the same things are important in life? because that can cause problems in a relationship, and intelligence, because you need to be able to converse with someone at a similar level, you know, because you're going to be with this person for a long time, hopefully. So I find with Anne, but personality-wise, we're just totally opposite. So I don't think that's a deep thing, and I think that's a nice thing because, you know, she's taught me a lot about listening and being more objective about things. So she's had a huge influence on me. And the funny thing she'll often say to me, you know, this introduction that you gave me, she would be like listening to that. And she'll often say, you know, if I'm writing something, I'm saying, I think I've got this, she'll say, get over yourself. I think people who keep you grounded is very important, particularly if you tend to be a big ego person like I am. However, if you are a small ego person, then you need someone who's going to build you up. And we all need that. Sure. So I think the people in certainly Anne would be one of them. I also had a CEO, Louise Brockman, who just fantastic woman. Louise has gone on to start the Advisory Board Centre, where she sets up advisors who advise small businesses and companies, and she set up this whole institute, and she's very inspiring. And so I had the good fortune of having Louise as the chair of my advisory board for many years, and then she came in to actually work in the business as my business partner.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And she was also extremely grounded, or she is. I still have dealings with her. She's very grounded, very practical, and very humble. Again, there's those qualities, and has run a small business.
Oh, that's fantastic. How would you say, I'm sure you have women in your business life surrounded, you know, you surround yourself with women as one should. How do you, Greg, inspire, empower, and help motivate the women in your life that you work with?
Yes, look, I have got a little bit of flack over the years because from blokes who say, look, what is it about you? You employ all these women. And I have scratched my head occasionally and thought, is there something wrong with me? I'm attracting, you know, I'm bringing all these young women, or I'm some sort of perv or something. But no, the reality is what I've found, a few things. Because we're a psychology-based business, look, about 75% of students in psychology courses are women and female. They're attracted to that. They're very good at it. So, and I've always tried to attract the best and the brightest from the universities to come and work with me. And they've all been, at one stage, many stages, I've had like 9 young women in the business and myself. And I've just found them to be wonderful in terms of their low ego and really focused on doing the right thing by the business and helping the clients, and which is what we're all about. So I found it very easy to work with women. I've always tried to encourage them. I've given them, you know, Uncle Greg's tips about working with men. It's got a lot better. But when I started the business 30 years ago, those first 10 years, a lot of sleaze in the franchising sector, to be frank, a lot of middle-aged men who had a bit of an attitude. And so I trained the girls up on how to look after themselves and how to stand their ground when they're working with men, not to take any nonsense, to be professional. And so they were lights in terms of the contribution that they've made to the business. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. No, you really did. I'm curious, do you have any insight or any recommendations for where a woman who might be starting out in franchising or in this space in general could go or look to kind of hone those skills? Or, you know, those women that worked for you were lucky to have you sort of encouraging and empowering them. But do you know off of the top of your head any ways or any places where?
Look, I think it does come back to culture and boss. So I think try and find an organisation. I don't think it matters the nature of the product, to be honest. I don't think it matters even the industry, but I think it really matters that the people, there's a culture in that business of ethics and of trying to make a difference and trying to lead and be the best in their niche. So try and get into a business that values excellence and wants to be the best in the breed in whatever niche or industry they're in, and try and find mentors and a boss that'll have your back and look after you. Yeah, that would be my advice.
I love that.
I mean, I worked in baking bread. It could have been anything, but it just so happened that was the industry that I ended up in. And I learned a lot from that. It's a very good industry to be in food because it's very practical, very grounded, and you are, food is the essence of life. No food, no life, and bread in particular. But the culture of the company I was in was excellent, and we were also donating money to worthy causes, which I really valued as well.
I love that. So you spoke to culture, and I think that culture is huge right now. I think a lot of people consider it, even at this point, to be a little buzzwordy, which makes me nervous because I would never want people to stop talking about culture, right? It's just so important. What are some things that you do on your team for the people that you work with to really ensure that culture is sort of first and foremost, right? Like you're taking care of your team, your people, and their needs. What are your thoughts on culture?
Well, I talked earlier about values, in life with your life partner. I think it's very important that you understand as a leader what do you stand for and what really matters. Now, what I've done over the years is I have lined up all the best performers in my business. I've employed hundreds of people over the years, and there's been about 12 that have just been outstanding. By the way, all women. And I've listed out what do all these people have in common. And so I was able to sort of build the essence of the qualities that they're exhibiting, the behaviors, the attitudes. And I built that into our cultural framework. So we have 7 cultural values, and they are things like, we call it a servant heart, really wanting to give and connect with other people. The artisan's eye is another value that we have, like really looking at the details and striving for excellence in everything you do. Rigor is another one of our values. Making a difference, speaking up, having a voice. And if you notice that something is not right, you voice it, but you voice it in a humble way to say, I might be wrong, but I'm noticing. And you'll find with all my team, if they're at a franchising conference or a meeting or something, they'll always contribute or try and make a difference in a positive way. So I think it's all about being very clear on what's important in the way people behave and conduct themselves, and then talking about it constantly. So we have a meeting every Tuesday morning. It's called Greg's Training, half an hour. And I will often, look, their eyes roll, I know, but I say, I thought this morning we might sort of talk about one of our values. It's like, oh. And I think, yes, this is good, because it's not until the eyes are rolling that you know that you're talking enough about this stuff.
Sure.
So you've got to just talk about it constantly, bring it to life with examples, get creative, tell stories.
Absolutely. Have you always been sort of like this, in sort of an intuitive self, someone that can really read a room and understands people? Do you think that comes from your research as a psychologist, or do you think young Greg was like this as well?
Yeah, young Greg was like this, absolutely. I've always been curious about people, and I can remember sitting on a train and my mother just slapping me saying, stop staring. Because I would just be staring at everyone thinking, why is that person doing that? And I wonder where that person's going. And I wonder what the relationship is between that person and that person. And I still have that curiosity. Yeah. And that's why I love my work so much. So we're doing a lot of Zoom training at the moment, virtual training, and I really try and bring it to life. So when people are coming, when people dial into a Zoom call and their heads start appearing, yes, I will individually welcome people in. I look at their backgrounds. I'll often make comments about, where are you? And wow, that's an interesting statue you've got at the back. And it's not just small talk. I'm genuinely interested. I think that quality of being genuinely wanting to understand people is certainly very good for the work I do, but it's something that I think everybody should cultivate.
Absolutely.
And in answer to your question, did I learn that in psychology? Unfortunately, no.
Right.
The psychology training that I had wasn't that great. 8 years of my life was sort of sitting in lectures and stuff. I didn't really learn a lot. I did learn to think, and I do value my lecturers and mentors were very strict in terms of if you said something, you had to be able to back it up and say, well, where's your evidence? And I think that's a good habit. Because there's a lot of people say stuff and you're thinking, where'd you get that from? And I often do put up my hand and I'll innocently say, can you just explain? You said this. How did you arrive at that conclusion? And often they go, oh, I read it in a book or I heard someone say it.
Right. Well, that actually brings me to my next question, so since you know a lot about people, brain psychology, you're also curious and sort of just like people in general, what still shocks you the most about people and behavior?
I think how quickly people revert to unethical behavior when they're under stress, I think does shock me at times. And it's something I have worked on all my life. I've had some excellent mentors, including my father, and who was very much into do the right thing, no matter what, do the right thing.
Yep.
And it does shock me sometimes to see people will slip into telling lies, and I've had situations with staff members in the past where someone has not told me the truth about a situation. But I do realise it often is coming from a place of fear. And so they panic and then they'll say something to cover their tracks. Now, so I don't think it's necessarily deliberately malicious, but that does shock me. And so it does remind me the importance of in yourself and in other people, you need to build this sense of robust self-esteem to say, well, I'm cool with who I am and I'm not going to panic. And I'm going to stand by what I believe in no matter what. If a situation arises and I'm asked for my view or my opinion or to do something that I know is not right, I'm going to speak up. Yeah. Now, to do that, you need a strong sense of who are you. And that's why I keep coming back to the values, because values are what builds your sense of self. And being clear on what do you believe in and why do you believe in that. And being prepared as you go through life to change your views, which I have over time, based on watching other people and understanding and say, you know what, I need to let that attitude go and have a more mature, rounded view on that.
Sure. When you are at your best, when you are your best self, what are you doing? Are you at work? Are you
having
playing?
Fun.
Having fun.
Oh, absolutely. It's that relaxed sort of, again, it comes back to being comfortable in yourself. When you're just, I'm just going to go with it and have fun. That's definitely when I get my best ideas. I am my most creative and probably my most empathetic as well.
Yeah.
And that's, we call it green brain. So you've got red brain, green brain. Red brain is where the fear is, the anxiety, the stress, and the green brain is I'm comfortable, I'm calm, I'm composed, I'm confident.
How do you how do you get to be more green brained? Like, I think that red brain is so common. It's so,
particularly at the moment. Yeah. I remember when the virus hit and the businesses were closing and the panic, you could feel the world going to red brain and this sense of uncertainty and fear. So I think green brain, stay calm and breathing. I talked about eating before. Breathing's more important than eating because if you can go without food for a few days, you can't go without air for more than a few minutes. So I think that consciously slowing down and taking a deep breath is very important. It's part of, look, I've been doing yoga for 40 years and I found this particularly helpful just from a health point of view. And I have some breathing techniques that I use. So that helps. Yep. I think staying curious about what's going on around you, that sharpens the mind. And curiosity actually stimulates, it makes the brain secrete dopamine, And dopamine is like rocket fuel for our brains. It helps the brain to function well. So that would be another one. I think being confident, but not an arrogant confidence, but coming back to that sense of, well, what do I stand for? What do I believe? And being prepared to say that, I think is very important. And the other one is to stay connected with other people and make a little bit of an effort to see, remember what that does. It reminds you that it's not about you. So if I'm doing a training program, or now I'm talking with you, it's not about me. This is about you, Amy, and it's about the people who will be listening to this. And when I take that approach, I lose myself, I forget myself. And funnily enough, the paradox is when you forget yourself, the best of yourself comes out.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. We all know that you, or most people who know Greg, know that you're big into music. So yeah. I'm curious how you use music to inspire you or keep you grounded, or where does music play into your life on the daily or on the weekly? How do you use music to keep you?
Look, I learned, one of my earlier aspirations was to be a musician, right? And I was at the crossroads, psychology or music. And I decided to go down the psychology route and keep the music more as a fun thing. But what I've learned through jamming in particular with people, now when you jam, you basically come together with any number. It can be another person or it could be 20 other people.
Sure.
And things just happen. So someone will start a riff and someone will be listening and will come in with that person. Then the drummer will come in. Sometimes the drummer will start. Sometimes the bass player will start. And this process of listening to other people and working and complementing them is the ultimate form of collaboration. Sure. So I learned a lot about collaboration from jamming with other musicians. And I still do. And to me, it is the most enjoyable thing in life, because what happens is when you're listening to each other, you're creating something fresh and new. And sometimes it just sounds awesome as well as being great fun. Sure. These days, when the virus was really, it still is getting people down, the consequences, I would put out some songs. So I have a little pedal, a little loop pedal it's called, and I can put down a little backing track, and then I can go over it a few times, and then I'll make up some words, and I'll take a song, an existing song like Back in Black from AC/DC when we were reopening from lockdowns, and I was like, we're back in black. So I've been posting those on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And some people may have seen those just for
I've
fun.
seen them.
A great way to spend a Saturday, because it's fun and it takes my mind off work, and people get a laugh out of it. So that's how I'm using music these days.
I love it. I love it. So I'm having, I think, an internet situation. Hold on, give me 1 second here, Greg. There we go. Are we back? Wow, that was, nothing says interview on the internet like a little internet connection, not stable interruption.
We're back in black, as I was saying.
We're back in black.
You're back in black. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sorry about that.
All right.
Keeping with the music theme, just briefly, I've never asked you this. I don't know if you've ever said, who is your favorite band or artist of all time?
Oh, I love Ry Cooder. He's a slide guitarist.
Okay.
And he's an example of a leader who's very grounded, no ego. And he was invited to join the Rolling Stones and all these big bands, but he chose to just do his thing. And he's still recording with his son, who's a drummer these days. And I enjoy watching his YouTube videos. He's a great inspiration, and listening to him being interviewed about life and music. So he would be probably my favorite. And I grew up with Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix and all those icons. They were sort of very inspirational for me from a technical musical point of view.
Sure. On that same vein, and maybe yours is a musician, and maybe it's not. If you could have a video phone call, now that we live in a Zoom world, with any famous or influential person, who would it be?
Well, I remember I'm looking down because you sent me that question, and I thought, you know, all these at a dinner party, people have this game and they think I'd like to talk to Abraham Lincoln. I don't think so. I'd be too sort of freaked out talking to someone very big and powerful. So I like talking to people who are very natural. And I just wrote a story. That question inspired me to write a tip, my latest tip that just came out yesterday. So if people want to look that up, they can find it on our website. That it's about a 113-year-old woman. I met her when she was 105. And she's one of those people that changes your life, not from anything they say, but who they are. So she was so peaceful and just so kind. And she's doing a lot of it. At 105, she was still doing charity work and giving talks and so on. That's Teresa Sue. And so she was very inspiring. And when I was, I think I was about 25, and I had the opportunity to spend a day with a nun who I was driving around. Someone had asked me if I could look after her and take her out to a monastery where she wanted to visit. And that
seems like a random day, for the record. That seems like an interesting day.
It was well, what happened was she was just, some people radiate a peace about and joy about them. So being with her for that day and really just stayed with me. And she wrote me a letter, which I still have and I've kept. And just saying to me how much she enjoyed spending the day with me. And during that day, she asked me a lot of questions. So she said, I want to say to you, Greg, your vision for your life is so admirable, and I'm giving you my blessings that you achieve. Because I told her a lot about some of the things I wanted to do. So that really did change me as well. It gave me a lot of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes it's the more humble people that are just serving and doing their own thing that can make the biggest difference.
Absolutely. It's sort of like when you think about franchising, quite frankly, right? It's sometimes the people with the loudest voices or the biggest person in the room isn't always the one that has the most to say.
I used to, like, I would often sit at the back at the conventions, whether it's the IFA conventions, and people are on stage and they're like a big ape, sort of, I do this and I done that. And because I've been in those organizations and I'm thinking, no, you don't. No, our franchisees love this. And I'm thinking, no, they don't.
Right.
Whereas you'll sit in a session and someone will stand up and they'll say, look, I'm going to share a few things, and they're very grounded and they're very practical. And you just know that person is a great leader, and that's someone. And I'll often go and reach out to that person and say, can I buy you a coffee and just have a chat with you? I'm really interested in how you do things.
Well, I think that there's
clients that I love to work with.
Yeah, I mean, being curious, I think in general is one sort of trait that I think goes, I don't know, under noticed in a way. Like, I think that people don't ask enough questions anymore. And so I agree, right? When you meet someone that you just like, oof, I need to pick their brain, you just have to do it, commit to doing it.
Well, you're good at this. The art of questioning is probably one of the key skills to progress in your career and in life generally. So one of the things that I spend time with my team is encouraging them on how to ask a good question.
Sure.
And a good question is normally open-ended. It's like, could you tell me about, or I'm interested in. It comes from a genuine curiosity to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's normally followed by a lot of active listening and following up.
Yeah. Sure. Well, I do want to pivot really quick because it's interesting to me because I don't know, like I always find what people read in their personal life versus their sort of work life is very interesting, right? Like I'm currently reading a book called Incognito, The Secret Lives of the Brain. I don't know if you've heard of it or read it. It's blowing my mind. And when I say that, I genuinely mean that, right? You probably know all of the stuff that's already in that book, but for me, every sentence I read is brand new. And I'm like, it's changing the way I look at everything, right? But that's not the kind of book that I typically read. And I was like, I need to branch out, right? So what kind of books do you typically read? Maybe what's your favorite book? What are you currently
All right.
reading?
Well, I've got an incognito confession. All right. You don't get my inspiration? Phantom comics.
Oh.
Phantom was created by Lee Falk back in 1930s. I think he originally started writing. And the Phantom as a character lives in the jungle. He has no superpowers, and he uses his brain to think things through. And he's dedicated, to getting rid of, cruelty and injustice and all that stuff. But I just love the character and his values and his approach. And he has a wolf as his pet and a horse, and they do a lot of good stuff. So I read a Phantom comic every evening before I go to bed. That's my way of chilling out. And I've got a cupboard full. I've been doing this for 40 years, Phantom comics. Yep. What I love about the way that Lee Falk, when he was writing the original ones, is very limited language, but he'll create a sentence that might have 5 words, but he just nails the situation with those 5 words. And I think that's a real art on how to, capture a moment. So I really enjoy those. I love Jim Collins. Jim Collins put out a book recently called BE 2.0, I think it is. It's a book on entrepreneurship, big yellow book. And I've just read that, and just inspiring because it resonates with me, all his work. Jim Collins' work is based on research, but it's very practical. I do read philosophical books. Sometimes I go back, I dip into the literature of philosophers and religious thinkers. I find them inspiring, just to get into the depth of the ideas. Sometimes I'm Jewish by background, so someone sent me a book, about some Jewish philosophers that I've been reading, and someone just recommended a book called Deep Work, which I'm reading at the moment as well. On my bedside table, I have about 20 books. They're all stacked, and comics, all stacked up. And my wife's always complaining, that's collecting dust. You need to get rid of that. And so normally I read a Phantom comic, and then I'll pick one of those books and I'll read a chapter.
Sure. So
I'm a bit random.
Do you keep all of your comics? Are you one of those people that has categories and files of comics?
I think a few years ago, I laid them all out in the lounge room, and I categorized them in order, but they're in a cupboard. So I keep them. So when I die, someone can inherit them. They might be worth a few dollars, who knows?
Well, that was
I also collect guitars. I've got 40 guitars inside in the house.
40?
Yes.
That's
and so one of my thrilling, you were saying, how do you enjoy yourself? When I used to travel a lot before COVID shut that down, once I've done all my work and my lectures and presentations and workshops, I go out and seek a little guitar shop somewhere, a secondhand shop, and usually will buy something. That's a lot of fun.
I love that. I love that. That doesn't surprise me about you, because I know your love of music and of guitars, but I'm curious, what is something about you that would surprise other people?
Well, I've told you about the Phantom comics and the guitars. I mentioned earlier about yoga. Like, I've been doing yoga for 40 years. And
that's before it was cool, Greg.
That's right. I don't drink. So I'm not a sort of a prude. I don't judge people. I think people do what they want to do in life. But I decided at the age of 18 that I would not drink anymore. Yep. And I haven't drunk, since. So I probably saved a fortune. So that surprises people sometimes. Yes. I've had a few health scares over the years. I developed a lung infection called aspergillosis about 25 years ago. And it was pretty serious. People can die from this. And what I was very grateful for was I had my yoga teacher, I had my doctor, I had an acupuncturist, various health practitioners working as a team to help me get over this. So I was prescribed, herbs, vitamins. I was also seeing a specialist, like a lung specialist, who couldn't believe that I was getting well and kept saying, well, I don't understand why you don't have asthma, and what are you doing? I said, I'm doing this yoga breathing. And he go, no. But I say, I'm telling you, it's the yoga breathing. So that has been an inspiration to keep that up over the years as well, because that's helped to keep my energy up and my health in a good place.
Well, hey, I mean, being healthy is probably one of anyone's greatest accomplishments, I would say, other than your health, which I think that we can all be thankful and grateful for. What would you say your greatest accomplishment is? What are your proudest moments to date? And maybe that's what we can end on today.
Right. Okay. Look, the book Profitable Partnerships has sold over 200,000 copies, and I am very proud of that. And that's an example of something that I worked at, really pained over writing that book. And I did want to get that book into the hands of every franchisee and franchisor in the world. So I've still got a long way to go there. But I'm very proud that it's been so popular through word of mouth. I think I'm proud of my marriage, that been married for 34 years. We're still great friends. We still, I still really enjoy just being with my wife, just sitting with her, and whether we're sitting reading a book together or watching something on TV. So I'm pretty proud of that, because to be honest, I mean, I've traveled around a lot, and there's a lot of situations I could have got myself into as a man, men. Sure. Have problems with controlling themselves, to be honest. Sure. And I know this is all now come out and being talked about a lot, but there are physiological, I think we've got to understand that there are drives in life. Like, there's a famous book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Sure. And that's the only business book I can think of where the topic of sex he has a whole chapter on sex, and that book was written in 1945. Wow. And I think they took the chapter out for a while because they thought, oh, this is a little bit funny. But he talked a lot about men having the discipline to control their impulses and be civilized and do the right thing. So I am proud that I have, tried to always be faithful and do the right thing when I'm with people. So I'm getting a bit personal here, aren't we? But,
hey, that's the best.
Yeah. But I think that is important. And I do talk about this to my team occasionally. And they roll their eyes and say, hey, I just want to talk to you about professional conduct when you're at a conference or something. When people have a few drinks, often their behavior starts to shift and weird things can start to happen. And you need to know how to handle yourself and how not to put yourself in that situation.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you. I mean, what an excellent and interesting moment to wrap on, right? I mean, I think that we all find ourselves in these sorts of situations every single day. And if someone can teach you how to conduct yourself and figure that out, like, what a special moment to have with a mentor or a boss or anyone. I appreciate that. So, thank you, Greg. That was so awesome. I do want to say before we completely wrap, if anyone out there is looking to get involved in the women's franchising world, please do check us out. There's local women's franchising networks in your area. Chapters are listed on the forums and committees, part of the franchise.org website. I promise you're not going to regret it. That I can promise you for sure. But Greg, thank you so much for joining me for this very special podcast.
More power to you.
I cannot thank you enough for spending this time with me. Your wisdom has always been amazing for me. And I think you're just, kind of an overall amazing human. And I think that there's not a lot of that out there anymore. So
I'm definitely not showing this to my wife. She's going to be like, this is such rubbish. You're not that good.
Thanks, you are Amy. That good, and people in
really exciting. This 10-year thing that's been, you've made my day.
I know, 10 years to the day. I was in Dallas, September 23rd, 2011.
Terrific.
Crazy.
All right.
Thank you so much, Greg. This has been awesome. We'll see you soon.
See you, and
All right.
and
Bye-bye.
go well, everybody. Thank you. Bye.